going on, guys? My name's Eric Gordon Berg. Today we're going to be looking at Fire and Blood. Let's jump in and see what makes a song work. So this is an epic level boss track. So to start things off, we have to set the tone right away. To do that, we start with the string section. Okay, so there we have a really simple rhythm going on. It's just kind of setting the mood. It's playing a little bit with this scale called the Octatonic scale, and that's what gives it kind of that hint of ominous. You can hear it specifically in this note right here. Normally this note is not in the key that we're playing in. It should be one note above that, but by using the scale, it kind of sets the mood. So the next thing we do is we introduce the choir, and this just sort of swells up and launches us into the chorus. Really all they're doing there is they're holding down the root chord underneath the strings and what they're playing. And together they form this sort of launching point right at the start of the song. Next, we get a little rendition of the main theme for Morrowind. So in order to do this and keep things in the same kind of vibe going forward, the strings drop down and they're just chugging straight through, and then the brass and the choir come in and they play the second half of what would be the New North melody. And underneath, they sound... It's really simple, straightforward, but it really drives the point and it creates room for the melody. Leading up to this point, the brass also layered in with the choir just a little bit. It was very subtle. Just gives it that sort of Elder Scrolls feel. If we combine these two sections now with the brass and the choir, you'll hear how they lay the foundation leading up, and then the choir comes in with the brass and you hear that triumphant melody come. So now to keep things spicy and moving along, the brass kind of pulls back and plays more of a rhythmic, percussive role, and then the strings come in and then they carry the next part. So if you look here, you can see the melody goes up, the strings follow it up, and then when the brass cuts out, you have these descending rhythms with the strings that form this kind of back and forth melody with what we just heard. So next we sort of move back into what the intro was a little bit, but now we're expanding upon it. Now we're kind of in the middle of the fight here. So we have the same thing going on, except the brass are in there kind of hitting these heavy notes in the beginning. That's just kind of making it feel powerful and intense. And that's going to be these long notes you see right under here. So then to increase the tension here, the choir comes in and with the strings they do these stabs, just quarter note stabs. So now with all of these elements in play, you can hear it really punches and it kind of breaks away from the rhythm that's been going and it adds to the intensity. Next, we touch back on the original intro melody once again, but now the choir is coming in, filling in these gaps with the strings to make things really sort of punchy. So now you have a little walk down right there, and this is playing on that octatonic scale again, which is why it sounds so untraditional. If you really listen again in these lower strings, you can hear it just sounds different to your ear. We're coming into, yet again, a rendition of that initial melody, but this time we have a new little surprise element. So right there you can hear, same thing, playing a little lower, little softer, and we got some kind of harmonies going on in there. And then we have these quick little runs going down, and then that's what introduces the choir. And this whole section right here with the choir is what leads into what would be my favorite part of this entire track, which is, of course, the main theme. And of course, I haven't really touched on it yet, but there is percussion playing throughout this entire thing. So let's hear that with the percussion and the way it changes leading into it. So you can hear the percussion plays a huge part in that. You can feel it climbing with the choir. Something interesting worth noting is that the brass is non-existent through that part. So a really big key in creating dynamic, epic tracks like this is having variety. If you hang around in the same spot too long, it starts to sound like a loop. It starts to sound really predictable and cheesy. So even though we've been pretty much playing with that same melody throughout this entire time, every time we come back to it, it's a little bit different each time. We're kind of experimenting, trying different things, putting different colors in their different instruments. Now this next part is where the main theme comes in. And if you are unfamiliar with the main theme, it's very simple. It goes like this. I screwed it up, but it was close enough. That's the main theme. When I was working on that for the initial Morrowind launch trailer, I accidentally played a wrong note. And a lot of times when you do that, you stumble across things you wouldn't have done otherwise. And that was playing this major chord. So then it sounded like this. Way more powerful, way more emotional, and of course, way more heroic. So in this battle track now, when we revisit the theme, again, we're not playing it the exact same way. We're going to play it differently. We're going to have the choir come in, and the choir, female choir, is going to just play the chords and just that. And if you listen now to how the choir changes the overall mood of this track, it goes from kind of despair to just pure heroicness and epic. Check this out. I'll put just the choir and the percussion in there. Now, as I said, those are just the chords for the main theme, right? So it plays it twice, but once again, how can we do that differently this time? So all I do is I have the actual melody come in on the second time, and it makes it all that much more powerful than if we had just jumped right into it. And it's played on the brass. So when that choir first comes in, you hear brass kind of just doing some rhythm stuff. And that's it. That's all they're doing to start. And that's just kind of driving fullness and intensity forward, and also introducing that the brass is there so it doesn't just completely come out of nowhere. And then here you can see we've got horns and trumpets playing the melody just in unison with each other. And then we got trombones and tuba underneath. Okay, so that's pretty cool. This is my favorite part of the track, when all of the elements are in there. So the strings also have a role to play. Similar to the very beginning where it teases the melody and just plays that second half, strings are basically arranged the exact same way. They're just doing that driving rhythm, and then they come in and they play the melody with the horn. And if you listen, you could hear in that second half the basses and cellos, they start kind of breaking up a little bit. Mostly it's just in contrast with what's happening with the melody. But because of this rhythm that comes in here and it corresponds to what the brass is doing, it starts to make things feel like they're kind of breaking down, breaking apart, becoming less stable. And the reason for that is because of what comes next, which we'll get to right after I play all of that together now. And when you put all of those pieces together, this is what I would consider probably the best moment on the entire soundtrack. So here's sort of the breakdown of the song, okay? This entire section is straight octatonic scale being played. So this sound is what's used on, for example, the original God of War soundtracks. Part sounds very similar to that game because I'm using that same scale, and it has a pretty distinct sound once you recognize it. So the rhythm changes, the choir for the most part drops out, and you just get this string section. It's actually a little mistake right there. A little programming mistake. That note should have been gone, but we'll leave it. So when you add the brass in there, they're just kind of reinforcing that rhythm with the strings. And right here you can see they start doing a little bit different, adding some interesting harmonies. Now what's interesting is if you listen very closely, this little melody that comes in right here, that rhythm there is actually modeled after the main theme. But it's playing it in sort of this dissonant, disjointed kind of way, which really fits what's happening right now. So we also have a choir in here, And the choir and the percussion are really driving the rhythm here, and the strings and the brass are kind of this extra added element. It almost breaks down into this sort of tribal feel. So the strings are playing this very simple pattern here. We've got the violas underneath playing in octaves, and then we have both violins holding a sustained note in octaves. If you recognize that, it's because it's from the original New North launch trailer, right before you get all those big scenic shots. That was repurposed in this track. Now, I added a couple elements to spice it up, and this was years later I'd gone back to it, so there was a few things I learned along the way. This is a very simple little line on the horns just moving upward, and this is playing throughout that same section. And then we have that swell there with the brass too, which really launched. Down in the percussion, we have a timpani roll that really, really adds a lot. This is just one of those little elements that just wouldn't sound the same without it. Choir also plays a huge role in this, so they're taking on another similar form. Choir comes in right away, and they're playing just two different parts in octaves, and it's really filling out that space. So then right after that, we fall into the full section of the main melody, and it just plays straight through to the end. As always, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, leave a comment, tell me if you like it, if you hate it, and I'll see you on the next one.